Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Motivate Property Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Jones, the owner and founder of Motivate Property Group, based in Perth, Western Australia. And I'm here to take you through an unfiltered journey through the Australian property market to help educate and motivate you to reach your property and financial goals. This podcast is for those who want information or education on the Australian property market, those who want motivation for success, or those who want to become stronger mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially through what we'll be discussing on this show. While we are qualified and licensed professionals, this podcast is not to be considered financial advice, nor should anything we say be taken as any form of personal advice. All comments are opinions only, opinions of what's worked or not worked by me and the various guests we'll have on this show. We would always recommend seeking your own independent advice before considering implementing anything that we say on this show.
Do it.
Brhane, my man. Thanks for coming in again, man.
How are you?
I'm doing good, mate. How you going?
Good. Really good.
Good.
Always glad to be here. I think this is fourth or fifth now.
You're our number one guest, mate.
Am I really? Yeah. I don't take that position lightly. I hold it with great honor.
Yeah, nice, man. Nice. Well, thanks for coming in, dude. And obviously, welcome back. It is always good to have you on. I think for probably our newer listeners, I think probably a good place to start is talking about yourself and your background and what a financial planner is, right?
Yeah.
Because I know for a lot of our clients, particularly the new ones coming in the door, there is still a lot of confusion about like the role of financial planner, like how you help our clients, how it kind of ties in with what we're doing in terms of building your property portfolio and then you defending that.
Yeah.
So if you could, I guess enlighten our listeners, what is a financial planner? What's your role? What do you do? And what's the benefit to clients?
Cool. So as a financial advisor, we're sitting with clients, individual clients, couples, and really working out what their long-term objectives are. So sitting down with them and saying, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Younger clients, we're talking about the next 30, 40 years or so. For clients that are pre-retirees or in retirement, what does retirement look like for you? We can get quite specific for those clients. Whereas if you're 30, retirement isn't necessarily that clear to you just yet. But really, yeah, we're just sitting down with clients and working out, looking at the overall situation. So that's all their investments. That's inclusive of any properties that they have, as well as super as well. Looking at their current family dynamics as well, dependents, non-dependents. And then effectively our bread and butter from our service offering is really superannuation and retirement planning. So number one, having a look at your super, is that being invested appropriately for your circumstances? What's your risk profile? How much risk are you willing to take on? And that doesn't necessarily have to pertain to just super itself as an investment vehicle. We can look at their broader financial situation and say, at this stage of your life, are you taking on too much risk or too little risk? The same goes with investments that we can set up as well outside of superannuation. So, most of your clients are coming in having already purchased an investment property. So that's one aspect of their investment portfolio. And they'll continue to build on that. But what else can we do in the background that complements that as well? So looking at investment accounts where we're dealing with ETFs or managed funds. And then the defensive side, the risk management side of things, which is quite important in the early years, especially when you've just taken on a bit of debt, you're a high income earner, you've got some dependents. How do we protect that? So how do we protect your ability to earn an income? And that's where insurance has come into play. So looking at your life insurance, disability insurance, income protection, trauma insurance, and effectively it's all good and well playing this offensive strategy where you're going to work, you're creating this, taking on leverage, creating this investment portfolio, and yeah, cool. We're trying to be rich one day, but what happens if you're not able to go to work and generate an income? Like if you're the main breadwinner for your family, especially, and you've got 2 kids at home relying on you, what happens if you can't turn up to work? Yeah, cool, you get your annual leave and sick leave. What happens after that? Like you can't, most of us can't rely on our parents. And then, the next best alternative to that would be Centrelink or some sort of government support payment. So
Which is not a lot, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Really,
yeah, you struggle to get food on the table with that. So
yeah,
really, it's just ensuring your income. So income protection, we can insure up to 70% of your salary, and that comes with a waiting period, benefit period, depending on your occupation. and your cash flow, etc. But in the instance that you weren't able to return to work, you'd be able to claim on that due to some sort of accident, illness, or injury. And the same with trauma cover. It covers about 40 to 45 different conditions. The main ones being like cancers, heart attacks, strokes, and that's paid upon diagnosis. So if anything like that, something severe happened, you'd be able to claim on that. Disability insurance, total permanent disability insurance. If two different medical practitioners define that you're unfit to return to work at any capacity, then that will be paid out. So that has to be something quite significant. You could think wheelchair bound, for example, that lump sum would get paid out. And then obviously life insurance would be a lump sum benefit that'll get paid out to your dependents or your beneficiaries that you nominate. And effectively the idea is to leave no one worse off, because all this work, say you've worked, I don't know, let's say 20 years and you built this portfolio, and it's going to be, the idea was to create a legacy, generational wealth, etc., to look after your family and make sure they don't have to, not necessarily make life as easier for them, but give them that step, that advantage that you didn't have growing up. So if that, in the event of your passing, or in the event that you become disabled or have some sort of horrific injury, and there's obviously, for example, in the context of property, there's a mortgage associated with that. If you then aren't able to pay that off, you then have to liquidate, sell the property, and then pay off the mortgage, whatever's left, right? But then you've worked so hard to build that. How do we maintain that? So that's the idea with insurances. It's like, okay, well, if I do experience something like that, at least then I can still maintain everything that I have. If it's something significant, that may just be you sort of consolidating what you've already created. In the event that it's something short term and you just claim on income protection for the next, say, a year or two, at least you have an income coming in where you can still actually continue to play offense. You can still save money, you can still invest, etc. And insurance is one of those things that you don't want to have to claim on, but in the event that you do, it's probably one of the best decisions you make. Seeing it from a day-to-day point of view, we've got, almost every week we're just reminded as how valuable insurance can be. Especially this year, we've had some pretty interesting cases where it's just been an amazing outcome for the clients due to some pretty sad diagnoses, but they've been lucky enough to have insurances in place, so it hasn't been as bad as it could have been. I guess in the context of motivate clients, risk management would probably be one of the higher priorities, just taking on the loan to purchase the investment property. So just making sure the defense is there. And then now, reviewing your super, how's it being invested, generally higher income earners. So there is quite a bit going in there, and your employer is doing most of the legwork, 12% going in. A lot of people are somewhat skeptical of super and, just see it as this sort of account with money in it that they won't never get access to. So they pay less attention to it. And a few of those clients do come in, but I try and reassure them and say, look, like a lot of that money that's in there now is as a result of what your employers contributed. It hasn't come out of your pocket. So in the instance that you do need to access it, why not just ensure that it's being invested appropriately for your circumstances? Because it makes hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference, especially in the younger years. If you're in your late 20s, early 30s, even in your 40s, like you've still got 20 years. So changing your risk profile, just ensuring that it's being invested appropriately, do it once, and then have that constant review every now and then. It can make a hell of a lot of difference at come age 60 or 65. And then the investment portfolio side of things, clients come in wanting to continue to amass their property portfolio, but for some clients it may not be easy due to like income restraints, serviceability, etc. So then we can look at investment portfolios like the ETFs, etc., and a bit more liquid that way as well. So we can draw down on extra cash if we need to as well. So you're not locked into anything. So that's pretty much it. So the process, having a look at the overall situation, we do a discovery session. After that, we do a bit of a strategy. We've got some pretty cool software now that we can sort of project and map out the next 10, 20, 30 years quite accurately, taking into account inflation, interest rates, etc. and really helping the client visualize what the next 10, 15, 20 years could look like for them. So
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, cool, man. And it's good. It's good to really get a grasp on this because, like I said, a lot of people, and I hate to use the word misinformation so early in this show, right? But like a lot of people just don't really understand, and understanding how to use you in the best way possible only means that they're going to make more money long term. You know, so it is really important. But I think one of the I guess the hot button topics right now is super, right? And this is where even in the last probably 3 months, we've had probably more people coming to us in fear of what's going on with their super, which is always good to have you around and kind of get you on the show to get your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about firstly the most recent changes with super, right? Because I know that the government were talking about taxing unrealized gains inside your super above balances 3 million and above. Now, we're now sitting here on 23rd of October. That law has not been passed. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
But I think it's also worth us really sort of talking about this and what it actually means, right? And what it would have meant. So, firstly, when we talk about taxing unrealized gains, can you explain like what that means? And I guess sort of the pros and cons from your view.
So at the moment, gains, I guess, come in two different forms. You've got your capital growth and then you've got your investment earnings. So in the context of property, see as the property value going up, and then your rental income being the investment earnings, right? So the rental income gets taxed. The capital growth in the property wouldn't get taxed until you sell, right? What this rule was suggesting is that the capital growth in the property still get taxed despite you having not sold. And what's to say that that value doesn't reduce as well, right? So you could potentially be taxed on an amount that you no longer have, which was insane. And that's why there was so much backlash regarding that. And it's, now they've, sort of taken a step back and rejigged it a bit. But, very rarely DC governments do that. But I think just because of how stupid the rule was, a lot of people have now, the backlash was quite strong, and then that's why the government's changed their opinion around it. But yeah, it was crazy to think that you could be taxed on gains that you haven't actually locked in. Like, they're not solidified gains; they're just numbers going up on a screen, and then you haven't cashed it in or anything like that, and you could be taxed on it because you could be taxed on it one financial year. Imagine it's gone up 100 grand this financial year, right? Get taxed, you pay tax on that for that financial year. But then in July, the market takes a hit and it drops down to like 80 or 70,000. You're still paying tax on 100,000 growth. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just how stupid the rule was. We've got a industry body called the Financial Advice Association of Australia, so FAAA, and they were advocating quite strongly on behalf of financial advisors against that rule. And it's one of those things with super because especially younger people were really quite skeptical as to what the longevity of super would look like. If they're making changes now, what does it look like in 30 years time? So when they do things like this, they're really losing trust in the Australian people, and they're now losing faith in that process, in that system. The people that are retired now, they're not so much affected. It's more so the people that are tracking towards that, because especially your high income earners, you're contributing close to 30 grand a year, if not more. Just with compound interest, you'll hit that $3 million mark, and that's when now we're intending to introduce that unrealized capital gains tax. So and then I think, don't quote me on this, but from memory, the $3 million threshold wasn't going to be indexed. Correct. As well. Yeah.
Correct.
Which was
insanity.
Yeah.
And I guess just to explain that, so when they put this law in place, and let's just say we're living in the alternate universe where this did come through, right? We've absolutely dodged a friggin' bullet, right? So they've got a $3 million threshold. Once it's $3 million, you're now getting taxed on the unrealized gains.
Yeah.
But $3 million today, in 10 years' time, is not $3 million because of inflation.
100%.
It's probably around 2.1, roughly.
Yeah.
So, as incomes get higher, and as you're saying, like for you and me, like we're going to hit $3 million, no problems, because we've got a lot of time.
100%.
So the fact that they were also proposing this not to be indexed, in other words, it wasn't going to also increase with inflation, means that it would essentially capture like the majority of the Australian population.
Yeah. And one of their arguments was that it only impacts, I think it was something like less than 5% of balances. I was like, that's this year.
That's
what
today.
about in 10, 20 years time?
It's insane.
Yeah. So they've, I mean, sort of embarrassing for them, but they've taken a step back now and made some new changes, which, again, more tax, but in comparison to what they were suggesting, is a lot better for sure.
Definitely. And look, I've got some concerns, and I would love to hear your thoughts, just to reassure me that I'm not crazy here. But I think, the first concern that I had was obviously taxing unrealized gains is bad news for everybody. Like you said, if you're making a good gain 1 year and paying a shitload of tax, if the following year the market goes backwards, like, is the government going to send you a refund? Probably not.
No.
Right. So like from a tax perspective, that's just not fair.
Yeah.
Like if they're going to take your money when you make it. When you lose it, you just get nothing.
Yeah.
That just doesn't seem like a very fair system. So that's I guess kind of the first issue that I had. The second issue is more about the reciprocal effects. So, for example, if they go and impose this on super, I can pretty much guarantee, because I've had a shitload of clients tell me this, we pretty much stop investing in super. So all of a sudden, you're just completely disincentivizing superannuation. And again, if they were to go and implement that, for me personally, as someone who I don't really actively put money into super because I'm investing like a maniac outside of super.
Yeah, of course.
But I would just stop putting money in super.
Yeah.
I'll just keep going, buy my properties, pile more funds, go buy and reinvest.
Yep.
But then you've got to consider what it does globally, because again, there's a lot of overseas money that comes into the country. We start looking pretty undesirable pretty quick because of tax. There was a podcast I was listening to yesterday talking about how the movie industry in Australia is going to start booming pretty soon, particularly in WA.
Yeah, they're building that production thing.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so they're building a massive production studio, and the reason being is because when they're trying to produce in Hollywood nowadays, you're getting a 60% tax deduction by making the exact same film in Australia.
Yeah, wow.
So when you're producing a $100 million film, $200 million film, you simply cannot justify doing it in Hollywood anymore.
Yeah.
And they're coming to places like Australia.
Yeah.
So again, that's just an example of a simple tax mechanism is now in place that completely moves the market and changes the market. And this is one of those examples where it's like, sure, we can go and do this to give this socialist government more money, which is really what we're doing. But we're now completely disincentivizing our market in a lot of ways. And I can't really see an example of where that's happened. It has been a benefit to the country.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're right.
because if money gets diverted out to other countries, we've got less money.
Yeah.
We get poorer.
Yeah.
I think the third concern is the fact that, like I was just sort of mentioning, and I did say this on the show, I think a couple of weeks ago, right? But in one day, I saw an article in the exact same paper talking about how they need to increase taxes, right? The Labor government. They're also reducing the services of what Medicare and stuff like that's providing. And they're also increasing the salaries of all the politicians in Canberra.
Yeah, wow.
In the exact same fucking paper, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is unfortunately socialism.
Yeah.
It's just tax the buggery out of everybody to expand the government, provide more services, and, people will be happier. And that's kind of the theory.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is just one of those effects.
Yeah.
Which everyone knows who's listened to the show, I'm pretty damn skeptical of that.
Yeah. An interesting, sorry, my bit of a tangent, but interesting fact that came out, I think it was last week or the week before, in Victoria, I don't know the WA stats, but in Victoria, since 2023, 90% of new jobs created were government jobs. Like 90%.
It is a terrible stat. But again, like if we're employing people through the government purely to hit that employment metric, it's like you have to consider that, like, we're paying for that, like the taxpayer's paying for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, if they're not being used correctly, which I'm probably more on the pessimistic side. Most of them aren't, right? Because how can you go and employ a shitload of people? And I had this conversation with the team before, right? It's like, imagine the government sets up a property company and then tries to compete with us. We will smoke them by every metric. Because we've got the ability to make decisions quickly, decisively, and make it work. When you work for the government, you don't have that ability. It's bureaucracy. It's slow. And so, that was just a really clear-cut example of government funding or private funding, right? And who's going to outperform. And when you look at a lot of other countries, the private sector demolishes the government by almost every metric. And so, when we do continue expanding the government, expanding the services in terms of, thresholds for Medicare and Centrelink and all these different things, because we want to try and help, the poor people, like, I want to save the planet. And I think you do too, right? Most reasonable people want people to get looked after.
Of course.
But bloating this giant business, which is the government, which it really is, it's a business, bloating it and, requiring more taxes from the people to continue bloating itself. Like, it's not helping us.
It's not.
It's really not.
It's not.
And unfortunately, this idea of taxing unrealized gains, and even just the changes they have made with the tax and super, it's like it is for the exact same purpose, and it's the government bloating itself, spending money completely irresponsibly in the name of saving the average Australian, and it's just not doing that. And so, like I said, that's a big concern. But I think right now, like I was sort of saying to you before we started recording, right? This proposal came through and it got a pretty big backlash, right? In fact, I mean, I've been pretty vocal about it. I think most clients have been pretty damn concerned about it, and in the fact that, the government can even consider taxing something unrealized gains. Now, the backlash that they're getting today, if they were to then propose this in, say, 3 or 4 years, now that it's in the collective consciousness of Australians, my bet the backlash next time won't be as big. And then probably won't be able to put it through, but then 3 to 5 years later,
Try again.
Propose it again. All of a sudden, the backlash isn't that big, and all of a sudden, within 20 years, this now becomes the norm. And that's social engineering 101. And that's really, I guess, kind of my concern looking long.
Yeah, definitely. It even with the age pension as well. Just the changes that have happened in recent years, where it increased from, I think it was 65, increased to 67 years old, and then now there's talk about it increasing to 70, and that's like in 2025. They're talking about that, like what's going to happen in 10, 15, 20 years, and that's where we step in and try to help our clients to amass wealth where they don't have to rely on the age pension, because who knows what that's going to look like in 30 years time. And that's the issue with the government, right? There's always legislation risk that comes with any sort of investment that we take on. So it's hard because we have certain rules and parameters that we can work with today, and then we could wake up tomorrow morning, they could be completely different. So I mean, we can do our best, but it sucks when we're at the hands of some pretty uneducated decision makers.
Unfortunately, and this is unfortunately politics in 2025. But I guess part of the because I've got a few questions here from clients and our team, but I think probably the main question is talking around like the viability of, say, super. Right now, obviously, you're someone who does provide this advice on a daily basis. When it comes to, let's just say, the average Australian, right, and whether you consider that being someone who's entering the workforce or midway through their work, their career, a lot of people are becoming more and more skeptical of the fact that they're putting this money away. They can't touch it till they're 60. 60 may not actually ever come for them. I mean, shit can happen. Having said that, there are obviously people getting to that point of 60, and it's like it's nowhere near the point where they can actually retire. So they got to continue to keep working. Then there's obviously people, like we were saying before, where they just see this, they see this system and they're disincentivized by it. So then they look at other alternatives, right? So I guess probably the first question I'll ask you, right, is like, do you think super really is viable in the way that it's designed?
Today, I think it's still a very suitable tool in retirement. Dealing with clients that are in retirement and seeing how it's worked for them, and having years of data to work off. You know, I've got some clients that have entered retirement back in 2009, and just seeing the longevity of their retirement savings up until now. It's hard to speak of the future, the next 20 years. You know, what would super look like for me when I'm 60, 65? It's very hard to speak on that. But ultimately, within the sort of current situation that we're in now, yeah, definitely, I think super still a very appropriate tool for retirement. I'm hinting the next question will be like opportunity cost, right? Do you continue to invest in super and grow this fund that you may not be able to reach? You may not get to age 60, like you said, right? And I think it's always been, I think investing in general has always been a balance between opportunity cost, right? Because, you know, contributing extra money into super now, get the tax benefit, save a bit of tax each year, can't access it until 60. Okay, well, how do we find a balance between how much we put into super and how much we have left out? For high income earners, very easy to do because cash flow is strong. Employers doing most of the heavy lifting. We're limited to 30,000 a year. It might only be an extra couple of thousand that you need to be able to max out your contribution for that year. And that's not taking away from all your other goals that you have operating, or all your other investments that you have operating outside of super. And 100%, like, I think the people that we see that come in early to get the advice that they need to be able to create wealth for themselves are the same people that don't want to work until 60. So that's always been, I think, a suitable strategy for clients where they try to amass as much wealth as they can so that they can retire early and not have to rely on their super to get them through, say 50 or 55 years old for the next 5-10 years. So being in a position where you can retire early and then see you through, and then come retirement, you obviously have access to your super funds, and how you set that up is obviously dependent on your circumstances, but effectively you move your retirement savings into a pension phase and you just draw down an income from there as if it's like as if it's a wage. You can draw down fortnightly, etc. And I've seen some pretty cool examples now with a lot of clients where we've got enough data there. So some clients for 15 years, their balance is actually higher than what it was when they first retired, despite having withdrawn a consistent income throughout that period.
Amazing.
Pretty cool to see. And it just shows the power of investing, the power of compound interest, etc. And like, disclaimer, we've had some pretty good years in the market. You know, if we think really, like, in the grand scheme of things, COVID was a blip on the radar. The last, I'd say, crash was GFC.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're looking at a client's portfolio from 2009 up until now, it really just been trending upwards. Yeah, you got your dips, but long term, if you look at it on the graph, it's just been trending upwards. But for a lot of these clients, they've, you know, went out their ways, got the advice to set up their retirement portfolio. For every client that does that, there's another client that just cashes out the cash. They might just instantly pay off their mortgage and then just rely on the age pension.
Right.
So I guess that's a lot of the value we can provide when it comes to retirement planning. But in terms of a tool for retirement today, yeah, definitely. It's still, yeah, very appropriate.
One of the things you said before, and this is interesting, I've never heard someone say this. You had mentioned that, you know, your superannuation, you're not paying, your employer's paying. So it's in other words, it's almost like it's free money. Now, the reason why that's interesting to me, because as an employer, I've also got to pay super, you know, but
it's cost of the business for sure.
When I'm factoring in, you know, my team's wages or salaries, like I'm obviously putting the super on top, the 12%.
Yeah.
But, you know, I personally see that as a cost to the business, and if I didn't have to pay it, I could pay them more personally. However, you're right, like it's law. So whether we want to or not, the point is you have to.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
and not every business owner has your mindset as well. If that, it could be a saving to the business, which they profit, and you know.
Well, it's more if that's what it costs me for the employee, it's what it costs me. And I get that not other business owners may agree with that, and understood. But I guess from what you're saying, and this is a slightly different perspective, which I really like and respect, is the fact that it's like, hey, it's a fund that you're not actually having to fund. It's your employer who's funding it, or your employers over your career. Make something of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Which makes freaking sense.
100%.
And that's actually that's a really good way to look at it. And I've never looked at it that way.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Glad.
Now with that though,
Yeah.
because obviously the super contribution from the employer has also been increasing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that increasing?
I think I don't think there's any talks about it increasing in the next few years. I think this 12% is locked in until 2028.
Mm-hmm.
What happens after that? Again, potentially it could increase. But from a business owner's point of view, it'll get to a point where it's impacting the profitability of the business. And, you know, it could be this situation now where you were already seeing it happening, but we're not employing within Australia anymore. We're offshore. Like, you know, people used to complain about the big multinational corporations about outsourcing on their call centers, etc. But now, like, small businesses have to do it as well. Like, it's a cost to the business, like, and it's hiring an employee is so expensive. You know, you take into account all the insurances, super, etc. It's not cheap. And then if that 12% increases to 13, 14, 15%, it's a cost to the business. And, you know, if you're looking at a business that has multiple employees, not just one or two, it gets to a point where you may consider, okay, well, I've got to get rid of one person and I can replace that with two people in the Philippines or something like that. It's a strong consideration the business owners have to make. But it's a balancing act for the government as well now, because you don't want to deter people from, you don't want to deter business owners from employing Australians, because then unemployment increases. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a game of carrots and sticks.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, I don't think the government realizes that when they're putting these laws in place. It's incentive or disincentive.
Yeah.
You know, and if we're not paying attention to both sides, she can get out of hand pretty quick.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, you know, we do have VAs here that are in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Only a couple of them in the team, but
we've got one as well. Yeah.
At the same point, it's like, don't have to pay annual leave. Don't have to pay sick leave. Don't have to pay super. Don't have to pay all those overheads outside of what a normal salary would be.
Yeah.
But there is a point where, if that happens at a huge scale across that's not a good thing for the country. You know, so yeah, I can definitely see that. And so one of the questions that one of the team asked, and this is probably more about her personal situation, so we won't worry about giving her personal advice without being here and understanding everything. But, you know, her question is around like extra contributions.
Yeah.
You know, so for the average person, you know, would you be recommending, or when would you recommend to be putting extra contributions in or not?
Yeah, I mean, if the question was, are extra contributions good, then the answer would be yes, because it's saving your tax. However, it's very dependent on the individual's cash flow and their personal circumstances as well, right? Because ultimately you want to see what the overall goal is for that client. Like I was saying earlier, for a lot of the high income earners, because cash flow is so heavy, that's so high, they have plenty of capacity to be able to top up their super. And like for some of these, like, you know, employers are contributing maybe 25 grand, and then just a $5,000 top up from the client's point of view, claim that as tax deduction. For someone that is earning, let's say, 70 grand and only about 7,000, 8,000 is going into super, cash flow isn't as high, you know, but after you pay your mortgage or your rent, your food on the table, you don't have much left to work with. And then it's a conversation of, okay, do I contribute into super and not be able to touch that until 60, or do I focus on investing that surplus cash into either myself or into creating an investment portfolio and then redirecting that income into super? So it's sort of like a tug of war, but overall, contributing to super, yes, cool, claim it as a tax deduction. Depending on your income as well, obviously the higher the income you earn, the higher the benefits because of the tax savings there. Inside super, it's getting taxed at 15% anyway. So, you know, if you're at the 30% marginal tax rate, you're only saving about 15%, as opposed to if you're at the 45% marginal tax rate, you're saving about 30% in tax. But yeah, it's a battle of opportunity costs. If you had everything set up and, you had your emergency savings, you had your property portfolio, you had your investment account that was going well, then by all means, tack on the additional contributions to super. But for low income earners, it's hard to provide them that encouragement to do so, because what they have is so little. And it's so important to them to be able to sacrifice that for the next 30 or 40 years, depending on their age, etc. It has its implications.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, with the new super law changes that have come through, so what are the changes? So I've got on the screen here. So this is an article from I think it's 9 News. Sorry, this is ABC. It's got the new changes here. So from the looks of things, what they've gone along with is there's the $3 million threshold is in place, but basically, from what I understand, once you hit that $3 million in your super, the tax rate goes from 15% to then 30%.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
And then if the threshold hits $10 million inside your super, then you're going to get taxed at a 40% tax rate. Right. So obviously 3 million and then 10 million, that's a bit of a gap. And so they're looking at the moment. So the government expects the $3 million threshold to apply to roughly 90,000 balances, and then the 10 million to hit around 8,000 balances. Is there anything else that's come about of that, or that's the main thing?
I think they're indexing the 3 million as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And I think
both thresholds will now be indexed.
Yeah. And I think if they don't index, in other words, adjust this for inflation year on year, it somewhat spells a bit of a disaster, really, because like I was sort of saying before, anyone right now who's listening to this and is 18, just finished high school, you're 18, you're in the workforce, like you'll probably hit $3 million by the time you're 40.
Yeah.
Very likely. So this would pretty much apply to practically anyone right now.
Yeah. Assuming
that it's not indexed. So obviously if it's indexed, that can kind of grow as they grow, but again, that's still going to capture a shitload of people.
Yeah, of course.
So with this law change, and I guess this comes back down to my question of disincentivizing super. Yes, the thresholds have somewhat increased, and what they're talking about isn't as dire as obviously taxing unrealized gains. But what's your view on this and impacting super? Like, do you think this is going to be a net benefit? Do you think it's going to be a negative? What are your thoughts?
So still thinking about it. Super itself is, I guess, one of the most tax effective investment vehicles that we have at the moment, due to that 15% tax on earnings within super. And then you get obviously the contributions tax deduction as well. So at the moment, it stands as a pretty effective tax effective strategy. Obviously, the tax on the earnings above $3 million. So basically, up until $3 million, any earnings inside super get taxed at 15%. So that's what's currently happening. After $3 million, it's now getting taxed at 30% up until 10 mil. The 30%, so effectively what it's saying is, say, for example, you had a $3 million portfolio, got taxed, your portfolio grew by 10%, 300 grand, and then you pay a tax on that. It's interesting because I think where the issue will happen is when clients transition into retirement, because there's also, which they don't highlight here, but there's also a transfer balance cap. So when you're moving money from super phase to pension phase, you can only move $2 million. Right? So you move $2 million, you've got $2 million that's sitting in a pension account, and that's where you can withdraw your money tax-free. When it's sitting inside super, the investment earnings will continue to be taxed. So it's a pretty interesting consideration there. And when you look at the marginal tax rate on the income tax table, 30% is still relatively low. How does it go? It goes 18, I think 27 and 32 on the tax table. So effectively you're paying the income tax rate of someone that would be earning around, Corey's bringing it up now.
So I think it's 30% is, so from 45,000 to 135. And that would be most people.
Yeah.
So most people would earn between 45 grand a year and 135 grand.
Yeah.
So they're basically paying 30% tax. So that still fits with inside like what we would deem let's just call it moderate tax, like a moderate tax rate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the idea I was showing with that was that it's equal to what sort of the average Australian's already paying in tax, but now that's happening within super. And then clients now that have, earning between 45 to 135 don't have $3 million in super. It's more than likely the high income earners around the $190,000 mark, but that'll change over the next 10, 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Just with the nature of compound interest, etc. It'd be interesting to see, which I haven't I don't know exactly, but if they're taxing the capital growth or if they're taxing just the interest that's generated within the account, because then you could be a bit more strategic as to how you invest your money as well to limit the amount of investment earnings that are generated, to limit the tax that's on that.
So can you explain that?
So you have your capital growth. So in terms of if you look at the client's risk profile, you've got your cash, you got your defensive assets. So defensive assets are your fixed interest. When you hear fixed interest, just think government bonds. But yeah, term deposits are probably more familiar with people, the term deposits. And you have your cash, and then you have your growth assets. So you got Australian shares, international shares, and maybe a bit of property inside there as well. And then the defensive assets are your income producing assets. Well, heavily income producing. So your term deposits, you invest for a certain period of time, 4.5% interest rate, you get your income on that. Your international shares, Australian shares not so much because of the franked dividends. So a lot of the blue chip companies pay quite high dividends, but your international shares exposure, for example, you're relying on that growth side of the portfolio for growth. You're not relying on it for income. As you near retirement and you're relying on more stability, then you start to the weighting towards your defensive assets increases, and then that way you're getting your consistent dividends, etc. That's what gets taxed because it's income to the super fund. Whereas the share value increasing from 100 to 110 isn't getting taxed. So based off that, that's my understanding. They're probably taxing the income that it generates, so the dividends, etc., the distributions that you receive would get taxed, not necessarily the growth in the value. Then again, probably going a bit too far now, but the conversation around risk profile, the more money you have in retirement, depending on the client's circumstances and what their needs are in retirement, they may still be able to afford being a growth investor throughout retirement because of their balance. Because they have so much in there and don't need as much, they may be able to continue being growth orientated throughout retirement and therefore reducing the amount of income that is generated within the portfolio.
Yep.
So you can sort of, and that's not locked in, you can sort of mix and match it as you go throughout the years. So that's something that could be considered as well. So it'd be interesting to see how it pans out. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think the 30% on top of after the 3 mil threshold isn't worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But it is the start of something that could turn bad.
Yeah. I hear.
So now they've sort of flirted with the idea, and no one heard of this until last 12 months, and all of a sudden it's gone from unrealized capital growth to now doubling tax rate. The next government comes in, who knows what they will introduce. But we've always known super to be this thing that is a retirement saving vehicle that shouldn't get touched. But all of a sudden, during COVID, I mean, extenuating circumstances with COVID, but people were then able to access it. So there was some changes there. And then obviously with the issue of housing now as well, there's some sort of talk there about potentially giving access to super to be able to access funds for a home deposit. And then obviously now with the additional tax as well. So it looks like, I think if you're someone that's skeptical, they're just reconfirming your doubts because they're constantly changing things. It's constantly brought up into conversation as to how we can either tax it more or be able to access it earlier. So I think they're moving away from what its intended purpose was, and this could be the start of a trend. Who knows how it will turn out over the next couple of years.
It's interesting, man, because I mean, obviously for the most part, most people are struggling in retirement. The average Australian is struggling. And we're also a very wealthy country as well in the grand scheme of things. And so, this is again more a symptom of this not working the way that it really is designed. But I mean, with that, because I mean, one of the questions that we do get quite often is then using your super for property, right? And there's a few different ways. There's the first homeowner super saver scheme. There's obviously using a self-managed super fund to buy property and direct property. Are there any? Because one of the questions that one team asked this morning was around like exposing to other alternatives other than say shares and other than property inside super.
Yeah.
So, one in particular was talking about crypto.
Yep.
So not having to convert their current fund into a self-managed super, are there super funds or products out there where they can still expose themselves to crypto?
Provided it's regulated and listed, you can access it. You can also... provided it's regulated and it's listed, I believe there is now a crypto ETF of some sort. Yeah. So you can have access to that within your super fund. So there's sort of one, maybe three different levels when it comes to super. So you've got your retail and industry super fund, relatively similar in nature. Industry super fund, heavily indexed, not many different options. Like if you check Australian Super, for example, you've got 5 different options there. And then your retail super funds operate in the same manner in terms of the functionality, interface, etc. However, they now give you access to a whole range of investments. So any sort of retail fund, for example, listing a few, it could be Expand, it could be Colonial First State, it could be... I won't mention another one. And then moving them across, so the next step would then be a wrap account. A wrap account, Macquarie, Hub24, Expand also has a wrap account, MLC. So there's a wide range. And all they are is a platform, right? They just give you access to these investments. Their investment menus may be slightly different. With the wrap accounts, they're quite broad, and you can get access to US shares, Australian shares, maybe some other international markets as well, like Hong Kong, etc. But generally, it is, for example, in the context of US shares, it's not every US share. It's maybe the top 300 that you're limited to, that you can have access to. And there's restrictions as to what percentage of your portfolio you can have in that particular share, depending on what the share is. For example, Tesla, I was looking at that recently for a client, and it was a maximum of 20% or something like that, 20 or 30%. So there are some restrictions there. However, you can access, for example, if a client wanted to come in tomorrow and said, I want to have money in a Bitcoin ETF, we could do that for them. But we wouldn't provide advice on it just because of the nature of crypto. So it's not regulated. We, as financial advisors, are not licensed to provide crypto advice. But we can set up the facility for the client to be able to invest their super in that. Crypto, I think, I won't call that crypto, but I think just investing in general, the key is to diversify, as we know. So just whether it be inside super, outside super, it's all about diversification. So if you're going to expose your funds, your retirement savings to crypto, diversify within it and just ensure that, you're in a position to be able to take on that risk.
You're not putting your entire super on Ripple.
Exactly. And like we saw, I think 2 weeks ago, a week ago, liquidated, like a lot of them liquidated. So yeah, just be conscious of that. So, it could be like 10% of your retirement savings or something like that. I'm not sure. However, just be mindful of, you are exposing yourself to an asset that, one, isn't regulated, and 2, is highly volatile.
Yeah.
But you can.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, nice. And probably the final question is talking about like strategies when it comes to retirement, right? Because one of the questions a lot of the clients ask us is, we can build a nice healthy portfolio of property, all right, where we can buy, 3 to 5 buy and holds, couple of cash flows, start developing. But if I was to say come to you and I was say 50, all right, I've got a bunch of investment properties, all with mortgages, all right. What would be some of the avenues that you would explore when it comes to actually helping them transition to retirement?
Yeah. So if you backtrack from retirement, if you're in retirement phase, one of the key attractions to you is liquidity.
Right.
Having access to these funds that you've worked towards saving and investing, etc. So with property, obviously being a liquid asset, we can't just sell down a portion of our property as we go. So if you've got a property of 5 portfolios, say, and you're 50 years old and you're leading towards retirement at 60 or potentially 65, what we can start to look at is one, obviously taking into account capital gains tax scenarios, and then slowly selling down or liquidating the portfolio to then be able to contribute into super. So because it's an investment property, not a primary residence, we won't be eligible for the downsizer contribution, and you have to be over 55 for the downsizer contribution. Just for context, downsizer contribution is if the house that you live in and you've lived in it for 10 years or more, if you then sell that house and would like to use the proceeds to contribute to super, you can up to a maximum of 300,000. So if you're a couple, 600,000 between the two of you. And that doesn't affect any of your other contribution caps. When it comes to an investment property or any other surplus funds that you have, there are some limits to the contribution. So we have what we call a non-concessional contribution limit. So that's 110,000 that you can contribute after tax money, and that we can also use a bring forward rule. So you can do 110,000 this year, next year, and year 3 all in 1 year. So you could contribute up to a maximum of 330 this year, but then that'll limit yourself for the next 3 years. And then after the 3 years, that resets again. So that's a good way to sort of get into retirement, because you could probably sell 3 before 60 or into 60. And then you may have one that's sitting there and you could sell that at a later stage, depending on, how things go with the market, etc. Obviously, with capital gains tax, we're trying to minimize the amount of tax that you pay. So we're just conscious of the time that you sell. We can obviously use the carry forward contribution, so you're able to so the non-concessional contribution limit is 130, and that's after tax money, so there's no benefit in doing that. There's no tax benefit in doing that, sorry. And then the other limit is a concessional contribution cap, which is what your employer contributes in under that cap, and then any salary sacrifice that you do falls under that cap as well, and that's a limit of 30,000. For instance, if a client had previous years where they didn't maximize that cap, say for example they did 30,000 this year, but then last year they were only able to get up to 27,500, they're able to contribute that additional 2,500 this year, and they're able to go back the last 5 years and bring that forward to be able to contribute whatever that amount is this year. And then obviously that's a tax deduction to them, so it reduces their taxable income, reduces the impact of capital gains tax. Without the carry, once you maximize a carry forward sort of benefit there's not much else you can do. But heading into retirement now, you may be in a position where you're able to reduce your income from say working 5 days a week to 4 days a week, and little levers like that. And then just being mindful of when we sell the property, split it between husband and wife, and then you've got 330 between the two of you that you can contribute into super. Tracking towards let's say 60 now, we've got sold 3 properties, we've got, let's say, $3 million in super now. Depending on whether you're still working or not, we can transfer up to 2 mil into pension phase, and we call it a transition to retirement pension account, and you're able to drip feed an income to yourself. And if you're still working, you can still contribute to super. So a lot of, especially clients that are well off during retirement, will salary sacrifice up to the $30,000 mark, and then whatever their salary sacrifice, they may start to withdraw from the TTR. Depending on cash flow, if they don't actually need the cash flow, just put it into just keep it in super, and we won't touch that until whenever they want to switch off work, and just maximize the amount that they can contribute to super. But it gets really good when it's in pension phase, because that's the key here, where there's no tax implications now when it's in pension. Tax-free earnings, tax-free withdrawals, and that's where the compounding really takes effect, because by default, when you're 65 years old, as a minimum you have to withdraw 5% of your balance each year. That's just the government legislated minimum, and that's between 65 to 69, I want to say, and then 70 to 74 it goes up to 6%, and then gradually increases. By the time you're 95, ask you to withdraw 14% minimum, something like that. So the idea is that you actually start to spend your money in retirement. And
I can just picture a 95-year-old just walking down the shop just trying to find shit to buy.
Yeah, 100%. And it's been really interesting, like, because I've been dealing with a lot of retiree clients this year, just as a result of a recent business acquisition that Finwest made, a business that was heavily weighted towards retirees. So meeting these clients, it's been interesting to see a lot of what the dynamics have been like for people in retirement. A lot of people have actually struggled to retire. You know, you've been working for 30 years and it's just finding things to do. But a lot of people that are really well off in retirement, you know, will have more than enough past life expectancy. And, you know, that's when the conversation comes about generational wealth and how you pass that on, you know, estate planning, wills, etc. But even now it's like, okay, well, you've got plenty of capacity to spend money. Like, what do you want to do? It's like, yeah, we're happy. I'm like, they got their grandkids, they're, you know, doing their maybe 2 holidays a year. And they're not actually spending that much. And then, you know, if you think about having a balance of between the two of you, it could be like 2 mil, 4 mil, whatever it is. You're both withdrawing an income from that. So if you think there's no debts anymore, so in the context of retirement, if you had 50, 60 grand coming in, no debts, and you're living a pretty chill lifestyle, that's plenty of money. And then, you know, you obviously, if you want to, you know, travel first class, or if you want to go on a cruise, you can just withdraw lump sums as you go. Sort of treat it like a high interest bank account that's just in the background, and you can access it whenever you want. But the real benefit, and what I was sort of hinting on in earlier on in the podcast, was in retirement that a lot of people had this common misconception that if I come in today, I've got $1 million in super, and I say I want to retire, that's it. I've got $1 million. I need it to last me the next 30 years or until I die. That $1 million is still being invested. And depending on your risk profile, even like some of the conservative investors, we've seen 10+% in recent years, right? So $1 million, it's gone up by over $100,000 a year. I haven't come across a client, I've seen one, but I haven't come across many that spend more than $100,000 a year in retirement, provided that
houses paid off.
Yeah.
Kids looked after. They're
exactly.
adults.
Yeah. I haven't seen more than one client spend over 100 grand a year. So it's gone up 100 grand. Let's say they withdraw 60 grand that year. The balance has still gone up 40 grand that year. And I try to explain it to clients, especially pre-retiree clients that are tracking towards retirement and just have that anxiety to build up. And despite how well it's explained or how many case studies you give, it's not until that first year of their review when they're in retirement that they notice, like, wow, okay, I see the impact that it has now, because they're coming in with, say, 500,000, they withdraw 30,000 that year, and then their partner withdraws 30,000 that year. Their balance is 550, 560. I'm like, what? Like, how is it higher than what I put in? It's like, well, yeah, it's still being about 70 or 80% of your portfolio is still being invested. And then, but, you know, disclaimer again, markets have been really well. There will be years where it goes backwards, and then if you withdraw as well, that sort of magnified the impact, right? So, you know, I'm talking in the context of some pretty good years that we've had, but the general trend, you know, the general average that we aim for, you still have 30 years of investing even in retirement. So you don't want to go full cash, for sure, because then if you're withdrawing 60 grand a year with no return, then yeah, you'll finish up the retirement savings quite quickly.
Depletes pretty quick.
Yeah.
Now, I guess because one of the I guess to sort of summarize, it pretty much sounds like all roads really lead to super when it comes to retirement.
Yeah.
And it makes sense as to why. But I guess just to simplify it for everyone, it's, you know, super in my mind, it really kind of has two benefits. The first benefit is when you're in your career and it's like a big future portfolio that you're kind of putting towards. But when you're actually in retirement, it is essentially an account that's a very highly tax effective account that it essentially becomes your future. This is kind of how I'm filtering my money through to me.
Yeah.
Which I think is where a lot of people don't really understand when it comes to super, because they just see it as this, unfortunately, a lot of people actually see super as a trap. It's like, I'm having to put money in here for when I'm 60, I might not even ever make it to 60. But I guess they don't realize that second part of it, like what you've said, where it actually becomes this future fund that you end up living through because of the tax.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we start to sell down properties and liquidate some of your portfolio, and we're doing it with my parents now, right? Where, we've just sold one, the proceeds going to their super, we're diverting the income to the profits to both of them to lower tax. We're then putting a bunch into super to lower tax. They can pretty much draw from their super straight away and live off, and that now becomes a big juicy sort of fund.
Yeah.
Which I think that's where a lot of people are sort of missing.
100%.
So I guess in summary, super is still effective.
Yeah, definitely. For now. Touch base again in 5 years' time.
Well, look, we'll touch base a lot sooner than then, but hopefully the unrealized gains never sees the light of day, because that's my fear. Like I sort of said at the beginning, when we start playing this game of taxing unrealized gains, we are playing with fire. And, it's not just about the immediate, it's about these reciprocal negative impacts that sort of turns us to shit pretty quick in the name of funding socialists. So yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming in.
No,
always appreciate your advice.
Thanks everyone for the questions as well.
All good. I'll make sure next time we get some more for you.
Yeah, sweet. Sounds good.
Appreciate you, bro. Thanks for coming in, man.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Motivate Property Podcast. We hope today's show has helped you. And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our show on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. We would love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future topics, or if you'd like to be a guest on our show, you can reach out to us at Motivate Property on Facebook and Instagram, or you can visit our website at motivateproperty.com.au. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay motivated.